Gamble Music Production and Archive in Columbia, Alabama is your link to hard-to-find music and genre of all kinds. For you choosing us, we ship the same day we find it. Video 1, as in 2 and 3, is an example of my quest to find a certain opera, what obstacles got in my way, and how it was that I overcame them. This video continues to show music that you might be stumped on in finding is really easy to find if you have the persistence and determination. Or call us and we may have it in our archive for getting it to you sooner. If it's out there in the world, we can find it. We have already established that opera might have very well originated with the Greeks. My point in video 1 was to let you know that there's another means of establishing truth in music. Just because one person says something about music on a particular topic doesn't mean that it's not up for debate or discussion. When I teach a music appreciation class, the outcome of my class is always up for deliberation or conversation. We can only speculate what happened to an early composer's life based on what the musicologist has researched. The opera that I heard and researched aired on WTSU Troy State University Radio on July the 17th, 1993, and was one of the hardest pieces that I've ever had to research. There's only one other piece even harder, and it's discussed in video 3. The opera was Oedipe A Colone, and the program guide only listed the opera as 1230, the NPR World of Opera, Sacchini, Oedipe A Colone, Vanneau, Mio, Viale, Dijon, Orchestra Ensemble of Paris, Latham Coing. That's all the words that were on the program guide. You have to remember, the internet was not available then, and only computers that had any link to information was the ones that were hooked to mainframe computers. The opera was excellent. My collection during that time was extensive, even in 1993, but I didn't have this opera, nor had I heard it before. So I had no browser to speak of, and I had researched the old-fashioned way, by library, fax, telephone, mail. Those were about the only options that I had. Compact discs were not available then, so I had to find someone who had it on LP and simply transfer it from LP to cassette or reel to reel. Now the challenge is someone telling you, no, it's not available, but it makes the researcher more strong, I think, in solving the puzzle if somebody tells you no. Once you leave video 1 and 2 and you want to read a more detailed dissertation of what research I did do, go to the invitation address that's at the end of this video. The website has one of the pages marked Oedipe A Colone by Antonio Sacchin. When the opera was over that day, the work began. I immediately started calling record outlet stores and any contacts that dealt with music. The more I spoke to people, the more they told me, no, I've never heard of that before, and I knew it was going to be very difficult to find. Now I had contacted Bruce Scott, that's the host of World of Opera in Washington, and he sent me to Radio France in Paris. That's where the opera originated. Imagine getting up at 2 a.m. to make a 9 a.m. call to Paris. Eventually contacts were made to Milan, Italy. They were the people in charge of the EBU. That's the European Broadcast Union in 1993 and 1994. The research went on for about a year before my friend Alan Swafford told me, why don't you call the French Embassy in Washington? I had no clue there was a French embassy in Washington, much less that they had a cultural arts department. Just remember, every embassy has a cultural arts department. If the piece of music that you're trying to find is from, say, Japan, you would call, obviously, the Japanese embassy cultural arts department. Ascertaining all my information from 1993 and 1994, it got me nowhere, and got me no further than I was, say, a week after listening to the opera. I was just about to give up hope in finding it, but like all things when you research, seems like one door opens when another one closes. You are probably asking yourself, Scott, how are you supporting yourself all this time? Telephone calls, faxes, time itself, all of this costs money. I was working in Montgomery, Alabama for O.D. Warren and his son Rob, and they both were so gracious and so supportive in allowing me to spend time working on this particular project. As a matter of fact, I think Mr. Warren wanted to see if there was in fact an ending to this project, and a wonderful ending it is. Allow me a few more minutes. To give you the details on this research would take at least 2 hours of time to tell, and time being a constraint, I will spare you the greatest details, but invite you again to go to the website at gamblemusicproductionandarchive.blogspot.com, all one word, and the details are listed there for you. A few organizations that I haven't mentioned, which were instrumental in finding the opera that I contacted, were the Library of Congress, the Association for Recorded Sound Collections, Opera News in London, Opera News in New York, and I would be remiss if I did not mention these. The morning that I called London, I spoke to Mary Jane Phillips Matz. I had no idea she was one of the editors of the magazine Opera News, and when she saw my persistence and my determination, she promised to help. This was my second call to Opera News, but the first lead that I had was a dead end. It was when I was speaking to Mary Jane Phillips Matz that my life was about to change. Miss Matz is not only a prolific writer of great books, including the complete guide of Giuseppe Verdi's and Puccini biographies, she had written several more books about opera. I don't know why I didn't appreciate her statue and caliper more then as I do now. Looking back on her accomplishments, they are so great. We're almost finished. In 1995, at the Library of Congress, I contacted them again. Again, it seemed like when one door opened, another one closed, but when that door closed, another one opened. This time I spoke to someone entirely different. Mr. Parsons had taken my call that day, and I had told him that there was almost 2.5 years of research into this project. He had some sympathy for me and told me that he would be glad to help. So after a few minutes of research, he called me back and told me that there was a complete score available of Oedipe A Colone by Antonio Sacchin there at the Library of Congress. He also told me that there was a 3 LP set marked MRF 153. He was not sure, but believed that the University of Indiana or the University of North Carolina might have it in their special collections. Now what that means is there is a vault or a temperature control space that special pieces of paper, documents, records included, that this vault is protected and no one can just go into it without special permission or specific instructions to go in and access this. I saw about an airline ticket to go to Indiana or North Carolina. That's how determined I was to go find this opera. When I had then a conversation with Dr. James Glass, he was the head of the music department at Huntingdon College in Montgomery. He knew what problems I had in trying to find this piece of music. He also sympathized with me and set up for an interlibrary loan to be made. So Miss Nordis Smith, head librarian at Huntingdon College, contacted me September the 12th, 1995, and told me that the opera was there and I could come and pick it up and make a copy of it. I could not have been happier. I could not have shed any more tears of joy in my appreciation. Oh, Mary Jane Phillips Matz, you ask? You're not going to believe this, but she had called me that week at 2 a.m. at my apartment, told me that she had been researching as she had promised and found at the New York Performing Arts Library in their dance collection a crate that was unopened, but when they opened it, they found the original libretto to Oedipe A Colone by Antonio Sacchin. Here you see the first page of the original 1786 libretto. Dr. James Glass heard me cutting the music from LP to cassette almost a week later after that and fell in love with the opera too. And every year, in and around the January time frame, a night of opera is set aside for students to sing arias from opera. And then on that night in January of 1996, Oedipe A Colone was brought back to life after 210 years of being dormant. Antonio Maria Giuseppe Sacchini wrote a beautiful opera. Dust had finally been removed from it.